recognizing what are my default modes of moving through life, and do I want to keep those?
Yeah.
Are those things that are still serving me? Because the majority of them come from childhood.
Yep.
That's where they started, and some of them I can put the pieces together and understand. Some of them I'm still trying to figure out and kind of like get the nuance of, because a lot of it's shadow, right? It's the subconscious ways that we move through the world that I'm trying to understand mine so that I can decide whether or not that's something that's still serving me.
I'm ready.
I'm ready. Are you completely, fully, 100% present and ready to go? I
am as present as I can be.
How often do you feel like you're not in your body?
Often.
Right?
Yeah. Like, it's not even, what's the best way to say it? Like, it's not that I'm not present, right? But my brain is somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right? My thoughts, my consciousness is on something else.
For sure.
Right? So it's one of those like, are you here? Yeah.
Sure. Checking in. What are we doing?
Right.
What are we talking about?
But I think part of that could also come into the idea of like you've been in a situation where like the Groundhog Day, the monotonous, repetitive, kind of just continuously doing the same thing left and right. And so your body is like, yeah, I can totally go through these motions. Right. And then all of a sudden you're like, where the hell am I?
Yeah.
Right. It's like driving and all of a sudden you're like, what exit am I at?
I used to have a theory about that, and I would tell people all the time, and whether it's right or wrong, I don't have any fucking clue, right? But that thing where you're driving, and the next thing you know, you're like pulling into your driveway, and you don't remember getting off the freeway, you don't remember taking the exits or the left or the rights or anything, and you're like, how the hell did I get here?
Yeah.
And what I would tell myself is, that's my brain or my higher self or whatever doing its thing where it's like, hey, you need to relax a little bit. So we're going to kind of zone out and give your brain a decompression.
Yeah.
Right? Because your body, driving is a great example where you're just going through the motions.
Autopilot.
You don't even have to think about it anymore. But I don't know if that's the case or not. I think it's probably reckless driving in some capacity.
Yeah, it's 100% reckless driving. Because there's always that, and then all of a sudden you're like, wow.
Yeah. It's like you're back in your body. What the fuck?
How did I get here? You're like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And to you, you're like, asshole came out of nowhere. And they're like, dude, this jerk's been driving like this for an hour.
Yeah. No shit. You've been called in 5 times already. You're just like, I'm on my way home. Everything's fine.
People are like, there's a drunk driver. He's asleep at the wheel. And you're
I'm really excited about this whole entire fucking endeavor. Yeah. Like, I'm so jazzed. I'm so ready. I'm so excited for it. One of the things, as we've been talking about this first episode, I'm excited to learn about you. Like, I feel like I have like a flash, not even a flash. Like, I've got like I've seen the preview of Ben. Like, I've watched the trailer for Ben, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so excited.
Well, and I was thinking about this because we talked kind of like, hey, here's what we're going to go over, right? And I'm like, yeah, and it's made me think to myself, like, what do I know about Craig?
Right.
Who is Craig in my mind? And I have this rendering of who Craig is, but it's only 10% complete, right? And maybe not even 10%, maybe only 2%. Right? I have an exterior, right? I have some understanding of Craig's physical capabilities, right? And we've had numerous conversations, right? We enjoy spending time talking and stuff like that. So I have those things, but there's so much of it, right, that I don't know. So
you excited?
I am. I'm excited for not just, and I'll be 100% honest, not just this, right? This conversation, this set, this experience, but I am excited to. I think we were talking about this, talking about friendship, right? And like, I've had 3 friends. 3 like best friends in my life. And as my wife was explaining, like, I don't really, like, I've got good friends, right? People who I hang out with, people who I do things with and stuff like that. Yeah. But I haven't really, and I was trying to put this together as like, how do you as an adult cultivate that kind of friendship? I believe as a child, you you have these shared experiences. You're experiencing growth at the same time, right? Me and my friend Bobby Mitchell went through puberty together. Right. Like he had chest hair way before I did. And I was like, okay, like, man, and he was always bigger than I was. And then one day it was like, oh, maybe I'm a little bigger. And then like I surpassed him in like stature and stuff like that, in size and whatnot. And it was like, oh, okay. And that changed like things.
Yeah.
But we experienced all that together. Like we drank our first beers, really like the first time, not the first time I ever got drunk, but the first time I was like as myself in drinking.
Yeah.
And like me and him did that together. Right. And then my friend Mike, who was my sister's ex-husband, who we are no longer in contact, like we grew up, we went to school together. We were on the robotics team together. Like we did all these really cool things. But how do you do that as an adult? Right? Like I am always open to experiences, right? But I'm real happy. Like I'm not trying to grow up anymore, right? If anything, I'm trying to grow down maybe a hair.
Okay.
Right? Maybe you're like, hey, you got a little too serious. Let's tone it back a little bit.
Right.
Easy with the polo shirts, right?
I'm wearing this. This is my man outfit.
This is my man outfit, right? I almost put a polo on this morning. Right? And Jamie was like, yeah. And I was like, I put a different shirt on. And she was like, the company that I work for, she's like, you going to wear that? And I was like, I guess not, now that you question it.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, I'll just switch to like what I know. OD green. There you go.
There you
Comfortable.
Go. It works.
What about you? Like what about this are you the most excited about?
The most excited about, I think truthfully, the thing I'm most excited about with all of this idea of doing a podcast together and kind of, watching and seeing what it's going to grow into and what we can kind of create together with it. Truthfully, it's just the excitement over you. Mm-hmm. It's the excitement over the opportunity to cultivate a friendship together.
Yeah.
And to really have a dedicated space to not just sit and get to know each other and to have conversations, but to connect with another man in a deep, meaningful way. Mm-hmm. Like that's something that I'm really excited about. It's something that I've had over the course of my life in various ways and relationships and time periods and things like that. Uh-huh. But to be able to have this now as kind of like the playing field in a sense, even though, do you know what I mean? It doesn't feel like we're necessarily, playing. It's just a great opportunity, and I'm excited for that. And then all the other things on top of it, I'm looking forward to some of the other possibilities and things as well. But mostly it's just the opportunity to get to hang out and chat.
Yeah.
And get to know you better.
Well, I think that's if you think about, and because I'm trying to build this construct in my mind of what is all this, right?
Right.
And if you think about the idea of every other man, right, outside of my friend John Ward, who I went to boot camp with, right, that's my last best friend that I've cultivated, right? Okay. That I've built. But we went through a lot of trauma bonding and stuff like that, right? Whatever we want to call that.
I think trauma bond works.
It's a totally and we'll talk about some of those stories later. But the idea of I was trying to think about all right, what other friends have I worked with? And it's friends in jiu-jitsu or CrossFit or weightlifting or other experiences, but it was the hobbies that brought me to people, but then we just knew each other within those hobbies. Yeah. Right. And I've got a friend of mine, Cornell, who lives in California still. We talk about all kinds of stuff. Right. But at the same time, neither of us go out of our way to spend time together, to intentionally learn more about each other. If I'm over in California, we're having dinner and we are telling stories, we do that. Right. But because we're not young anymore, right? I have a family, you have a family, right? We have careers and hobbies and other responsibilities and stuff like that. So the time for those things is harder to direct, right? Or to put efforts towards. But when we have said hey, we're going to do this and we're going to carve out time every week to sit down and connect and bond and share and reflect, right?
Yeah.
That's one of those things where you're like, yeah, I mean, that's how a friendship is built, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, I was like, do I really want to be friends with Craig?
Right.
Right? I was like, I don't really know him that well.
Yeah.
And then I was like, yeah, it'll be fine.
Yeah, I wonder about that same thing too, where it's like I said, I've watched the trailer of Ben, and I like it. It feels like a movie that I want to tune into. It feels like a show that I'm interested in and that I think I'm going to enjoy. And there's always that thing of like, we might get like 3 months into this fucking thing and be like, yeah, this guy, I don't know.
Yeah, he's a little nuts.
Kind of not really feeling it. I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think that's going to happen either. I feel like we have, because how long have we known each other now?
That's what I was thinking too about before we started. We've been in Tennessee for a year and a half, a little over a year and a half.
Okay.
And I mean, we basically met when we got here because we moved in December of 22.
Okay.
And then we started jiu-jitsu at the place at January of 23.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, I pretty much met you then.
Yeah. So that's like a year and a half, right? Yeah. A little over a year and a half. And yeah, because you came in and it's so funny. I was thinking about that. I was driving here I remember I had missed a day. I'd been on the road or something, and somebody saw me like, "Hey, did you meet the new guy?" And I'm like, "What?" They're like, "Yeah, there's a new big guy." And I'm like, "Oh, no." And they're like, "He's a purple belt at the time or whatever." You're like, "Hey, he's a purple belt." I was like, "Oh, okay." And they're like, "This big guy knows what he's doing." I was like, "Cool," right? Because at that point, like, Chad was the other big guy around, other than the black belts and stuff, right? But like, and obviously like the Codys and stuff, but like, it was like, okay, I'm excited. And I remember like we got that first like opportunity to roll. I don't even think we rolled the first time we were at class together.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah. But I remember I was watching what you were doing and I was like, all right, let's see what this guy, and then we came back and then we got a chance to roll and I was like, okay, it's different because we have different styles, but I was like, all right. And then, we just started talking a little bit and trying to think, what was the first time we did something outside of jiu-jitsu?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm terrible with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Steph will pull it out and be like, oh, it was, and you remember it was that thing. It was the 4th of July, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, yeah, I don't remember.
It just reminds me of the meme that is like, I don't know if you're telling me the truth or if you're just like manipulating me with my poor memory, right? When my wife, Jamie will look at me like, no, we talked about all this.
Like, she's, I told you that already.
Yeah, I'm like,
yeah.
I think we... May have.
Yeah, I don't remember. We went to lunch, one afternoon, but I think that was last year. Wasn't that last year or was it earlier this year? It doesn't fucking matter. We don't need to sit here. We're like, when was it?
When was it?
Let me pull out my phone and see if I can remember the calendar.
Go back to my Facebook memories.
Speaking of Facebook memories, something funny happened this morning. I was scrolling through and today that we're recording, so obviously, it's not the day that this comes out, but the day that we're recording this is the same day that I started the men's group back in Salt Lake City. And that was in 2017.
That's cool.
So it's like 7 years later.
Yeah.
Doing something. It's not, this is in the space of
this arc, right? Sure. Yeah.
It's totally there's a cycle here for me.
It's a circle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm excited to see what it looks like.
Yeah. That's really cool.
Isn't that interesting?
Dude, it's if there's you could get into like the upsides and downsides of Facebook, right? But the idea, I love that it shows you like, hey, on this day, it's one of those things because it gives you this internal like, I can reflect on some, because I get a lot of these where like, and I look back and you're like, God, you were an idiot.
some of my stuff.
Oh man,
I'm like, I took the biggest shit this morning. Like at one point I had this post from God, I don't even know, like 2010 or something, where I was like, I got on the scale at 230, took a shit, now I'm 225, and I'm like, you're an adult.
5 pound shits, high five.
Yeah. I'm like, I'm 30 something years old at that point in my life, and I'm like, this seems like something good that needs to go up on the people need to know.
It's the pre-apocalyptic witness me
exactly.
from like Mad Max, like witness me.
Yeah, it's too funny.
But it's funny. We actually just deleted Facebook, so we didn't get rid of Facebook. But my wife was like, "Hey, we tend to get into that death scroll, right? Where you're just like going," and she's like, "I think we should delete this." And I was like, "Okay." There is caveats to it, right? Like she has removed it from her phone and all that. I deleted it off my home screen. I still, for work, occasionally have to like check in. Like we have user groups and stuff like that I have to kind of like be into. I have to help with some of the marketing for what I do and stuff like that. But so I can't just get rid of it. It's on my desktop, right? But I was like, okay, cool, no big deal. Like I'll just keep it there. And yesterday was like the first day that I was like, yeah, this isn't on my phone. And it's like,
how'd it feel?
I'm not going to lie. It feels good. I find myself struggling to the time that I would desk scroll or just whatever, right?
Yeah, zone out with it.
Now I'm like,
right?
Like, what do I do? My YouTube has increased because I've like, all right, well, I'm not going to scroll on this. I'll find something else. I have probably doubled the amount of time I've spent playing Texas Hold'em on my phone in the last like 3 days than I have in the last year. And my LinkedIn account is really up to date.
It's fucking on point.
Yeah. But it's great to get away from it, right? Because it is, and I try to think of like, how can I use this for me and the things that I like, right? For like social media. So I am in a lot of like groups around things that I like. So go-karts and, building things and fabrication and stuff like that. Plus I have the work groups that I have to keep an eye on. And so I use them for a lot of that. So like when we were talking about getting rid of this, I get into the groups and start reading. So Jamie, my wife, was like, why don't you check Reddit out? And I was like, yeah, I already do Reddit too. Like I like to consume content and I like to see this stuff, but I like to learn about the things that I like.
Yeah.
Right. So it was like, all right, but now I don't have this like on this day. Right.
So it's not, we deleted Facebook accounts. We just took it off our phones. And
took it off our phones.
Okay.
Which is like just that little act. So like if I want to get on, I can go get on my computer. I can, sit down and look up the thing that I want to know. But I'm not resorting to it in the moment of boredom.
For sure.
Right? Which I think is really like we're, what's the right, is it cultivating? Like we're really on top of why I'm on here.
Okay.
I'm not using this as an escape from, I have 10 minutes between the time my kids put their shoes on and when we leave.
Right.
Right? Because that's what would happen.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, hey, I just finished this. I got my shoes on. I'm waiting for them to finish brushing their teeth. I'll open Facebook for a minute.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, this is.
Yeah, I think back in the day when people, because we've obviously been around since cell phones have been around, right? We saw the cell phone boom and everything start coming and social media and the whole 9 yards and everything like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody knew what they were doing or creating, right? It's like nobody understood it.
Yeah.
And then when it became apparent of the potential for what it had, then it was like, oh, we know what to do with this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then immediately it's just turned into fucking dopamine.
Yep.
Where it's like they knew how to make it more and more and more and more addictive.
Yeah.
And I have a complete like love-hate relationship with it over the years, where it's been the thing that I very much will just sit and doom scroll and go through stuff. And I'm at a point now with it, especially with everything that we have to do for our stuff, right?
Yeah,
it's like, I can't. When I say I can't, I'm choosing not to.
Exactly.
I'm choosing not to.
Yeah.
But anymore, I'm not on social media for consumption. I'm on social media for work.
Yeah.
We're posting and commenting and curating and doing all sorts of different stuff. So it's not, scrolling. And I have to consciously set aside time to be like, oh, okay, cool. Now I can just consume a little bit of social.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even then, I'll still get caught up in it. It would be nice. I was telling Steph the other day, she's like, what do you need? Like, what would be? And I'm like, I just want a fucking day off from all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Not having to create anything, not having to post anything, not having to respond to anything, just to set all of it down for ideally I would like much longer than a day.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's like camping, right? Mm-hmm. Like I have been really trying to, when we're going places, not just the social media, but my phone as a whole, right? Like I don't want this, I was listening to one thing and they were talking about like, oh, it's a portal for you to reach out to and learn more. And for people, I was like, no, it's a collar. It's a leash that people can pull you back from. So I do it like when we were playing pickleball, right? Yeah. I literally put my phone like in a bag. And from the moment we got to the pickleball courts to like 1 p.m. that afternoon, I hadn't even looked at my phone. Mm-hmm. So I'm really trying to focus on like, hey, I'm just going to set my stuff aside. Like I don't need my phone right now. It's a Sunday or it's, this isn't work time. It's okay.
Are you checking your phone now?
I am. And I am apologize.
You're totally
somebody
fine.
has called me like 4 times.
Yeah, it's no worries.
Hello?
Hey, this is Nikki at Plaza.
Oh, hey. I am not home, and neither is my wife. I am really sorry.
Okay.
Can we reschedule? I'm so sorry.
That's okay. The next availability I'm going to have is going to be Tuesday the 3rd.
That's fine.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. I spaced that all day.
What was it?
We have a lemon of a refrigerator.
Okay.
And I'm calling it a lemon. We've had our local electronics, Plaza Electronics. They have been out 6 different times now to look at, not 6, I'm embellishing. It's been 3 or 4 now, 4. This is the 4th iteration. But like the freezer just stops working. And it's like, oh, this is a thing.
Is it a newer fridge?
It's relatively new. It's like 4 years old. They bought it when we got the house in August of 2020. It, was new for the house.
Okay.
Right. Like they bought it to put in the house to sell the house. And so it's still under warranty. Like we've registered it, it's warranted and all that stuff. So it doesn't cost us really anything.
It's
but
such a fucking pain.
It's such a pain. And like the joke is like, so because you just get food, like our freezer there's not much in our freezer now because it's thawed and froze so many times. But like I opened a drumstick the other day and it was just a bar because it had just completely melted and it was just a flat bar with an ice cream cone. I was like, I'm still going to eat it.
It's still tasting great.
Yeah. But so back to before I was so rudely interrupted by the Plaza Electronics people.
By your cell phone.
Yeah, by my cell phone is trying to get away from my cell phone and just trying to so camping. That's what I was going with this. Camping. I love being out in the woods where I can just say I'm just going to go put my phone in the camper or in my vehicle or away. I don't need this right now. Right. I'm sitting around a campfire or a table with friends and family and my kids. I'm in nature. I can hear the birds and the sun and the trees and the grass and all this. I don't need my phone to entertain me right now. I am entertained with are you not with all this, right? Mm-hmm. And so I love that idea of no, let's go camping so we can get away from
all of it,
right?
Yeah.
It's that very intentional removal of.
Yeah, it's funny. Even when that happens, I'll still have this, suddenly it's like, because we went camping this summer.
Yeah.
When we were up in Gatlinburg. And, the end of the day, you come back and we're sitting there relaxing. And then suddenly I'm like, oh, I want to get on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
But it still doesn't even feel right. Like it's this weird sensation of like, it's almost like taking a drink when you don't want to drink. Like it's, having a cigarette when you're like, I don't really want to smoke, but I'm going to smoke anyways, just because everybody else is smoking or something. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's kind of the idea, right? For me is like, if we were to go to a hotel resort or something like that, and I pulled out my phone while we were sitting by a pool and there's nothing going on, like I don't feel too bad about that, right? Or if we're out somewhere, like I don't think twice about it, right? But if we're in nature and I am trying to bring technology to make me comfortable here, like I say that as somebody who's like, no, I'm sleeping in a camper.
I was going to say, you're not roughing it. Steph and I were in the fucking tent.
You guys were in the tent
when it was 95 fucking degrees.
It was.
Out.
You guys were totally roughing it, and I gave you prompts.
The tent's roughing it, right?
Yeah, right.
On the air mattress.
Yeah, right.
It was rough.
Yeah, with the air conditioned bathhouses and the water and all that.
Exactly.
It's from jiu-jitsu. Chris and I were talking about, he's like, you can get a camper? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh man, just sleep outside. And I was like, no. Like I, as somebody who was in the Marine Corps for a very long time, I've spent enough time sleeping outside.
Yeah.
I don't need my head on the ground anymore.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've worked really, really hard to, like, if I don't want to sleep on the ground and I want to rent a camper, or one day if I'm lucky, let my wife will let me buy a camper or something like that, then I can sleep in that. Yeah. I like air conditioning.
I do too. Yeah. It's nice to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of time of being uncomfortable.
Yeah. Lots and lots of time of being uncomfortable.
I'm at the phase of life right now where it's like, jiu-jitsu is, I shouldn't say it's the hardest thing it can be some of the hardest stuff that I do still, but I'm not interested in like physically challenging myself anymore. Yeah. I'm interested in, like, the challenge for me now is how much can I actually relax? Yeah. How much can I actually not do? And that's really, really hard. Yeah. Like, it's hard to give myself time and space to just relax and not feel like I have to be productive, not feel like I have to be doing something. Yeah. And it's not even, because the doom scrolling is doing something, right? Playing on the phone is doing something, but it's, I gotta fix this. I gotta do that. I gotta get around to doing this thing. I really gotta mow the lawn. I gotta get outside. And, there's a running list of shit that I feel like I'm always trying to navigate and work with. Yeah. And being able to set that list down, being able to sit down, like, work, being able to sit down, because I do tons of like introspection and, I'm constantly trying to, earlier we were talking about being kind of dissociated a little bit in our head, right? That process for me, when I'm in my head processing, it's all internal work. Yeah. Where I'm going through like the latest, whatever has come up for me.
Yeah, you may not be sweeping the floors, but you are actively mentally working.
Yeah, I am processing through stuff. Yeah. And that I have to set down because that is also weight. So like one of my favorite things to do is, we've got that great tub, right? Yep. Just sit in the bath. Yeah. And, I usually will give myself permission. And by that, I mean, I don't give myself permission. I give myself,
you can do this.
Well, I don't shame myself for when I'm sitting there scrolling on my phone in the tub. Even if the whole hour and a half, 2 hours that I'm supposed to be relaxing in the tub is fucking watching shit on YouTube or laughing
which
at
is causing
reels.
all these like internal reactions.
Which is totally counter to the purpose of why I'm sitting in the tub and tilling. But
I want to relax.
Exactly. I used to do that, and then I would just shame the shit out of myself where I'd get out of it and I'm like, you're a fucking loser. Like, I can't, you can't even go without that. Right? Yeah. And I don't do that anymore. If I do it, I'm fine with it. I do it. But I try to find that sweet spot where I can at least just like sit. I might have some music playing or something like that. Or we've got a great window in the bathroom so I can hear nature outside sometimes. And then I'm just chilling and just trying to be in the space of relaxing and doing nothing, which means no consumption, no TV, no phone, no, podcast playing in the background. But it's few and far in between. It's hard for me.
Is doing nothing your natural relaxation state?
Well, what do you mean by my natural relaxation state?
So like if you were like, hey, I just want you to sit here and do nothing, 3 minutes, I'm going crazy.
Yeah.
I can't do it, right? It's that like, nope, my brain, I can't not be fidgeting or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I got to come up with something. So for me, like if I really want to like try to like, and I think about like get outside of myself a little bit, like what can I do for me, right? And I think the big thing on that, like for me, I like to go in my garage and I work on things. It's hard because it can be an effort for me to like get into that mode of doing things. But as soon as I'm there, I'll go 8 hours and be like, what time is it? Oh no, right? Like the whole day has gone by because I was physically doing things and thinking about things that are a hobby that is just for me, right? Yeah. So when I'm in my garage building, tinkering, welding, whatever, right? Like that's
super relaxing.
That's super relaxing for me, right? But if you were like, just sit here and bird watch, I'd be like, fuck those birds. Yeah,
but think about this. Like imagine, not necessarily sitting out in nature and bird watching, but like if you're up camping and suddenly you're just like, you get to the top of the hike and now you're just going to fucking sit there.
Yeah. Yeah. But could you sit there for 8 hours?
No, but you could sit there for an hour. You could sit there for half an hour. The natural resting state for me is very similar where it's hard for me to be still. It's hard for me to not do anything. Right.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the reason behind all of that, yes, it's like ADD. Yes, it's all of these other kind of issues and things like that. But I think that at the core of what it is, it's this dependency upon all of the chemicals, the neurochemicals, all the hormones, all the different things that I'm addicted to, right? It's the hormone thing. And it's the adrenaline, and it's the dopamine. And
I was going to say, so dopamine.
Yeah.
It's like the new catchword, I feel like, on social media right now.
Yeah, we're going to use it a lot.
Yeah.
This episode is all about dopamine.
Dopamine? Dopamine. What do you guys got? Some of that dopamine? But I see all that, right? Like, I haven't dug into, I understand what dopamine is. I understand how when you do certain things, your body releases dopamine and how that makes you feel, and then you crave that and you have this like addiction to it. Like I get all that. I haven't dug into it a whole bunch because it's part of me is like, I don't think I want to know all that. Like, like, nope, I don't need that microscope to look at myself. Right.
Yeah. I was very much an adrenaline junkie.
Oh yeah.
Like my whole entire life, as far back as I can remember.
Yes.
And I've thought about it from, it used to be like this badge of honor. It used to be this thing that I prided myself on. It's like this whole journey of like, I'm crazy, I'm wild, all these kind of different things.
You can't keep up with me.
Yeah, but I also really enjoy all of that stuff. And I'm like, of course you do, you fucking idiot.
Yeah.
Because that's a massive drug pumping through your body on a regular basis.
Yeah.
You're like, no, I just really like having fun. No. Yeah, you do.
You do.
But there's a reason.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. There's this, your body makes this drug that makes you feel happy when all this is going on.
And I heard something, it was Whitney Cummings on a podcast, and she was talking about, and I've heard it from a bunch of different places as well, but the idea that just as you can, in utero, if your mom is on crack or on meth or something like that, right, then you're born addicted to that substance. Same thing if they are in trauma, if they're going through a traumatic experience in their life, and they've got all of those the dopamine and the adrenaline and all the other things flowing through their body, the baby is then addicted to those chemicals.
Gotcha.
And I think that's 100% where I started.
Thanks, Mom.
Right?
Thank you.
It's totally the case. It's totally the case.
It totally is.
Because I can look, I don't know 100% what was going on when my parents had me. But from what I do know it wasn't like
sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of like, oh, we're so happy and peaceful and everything's all right, right? It was fucking shit show chaos time.
Yeah.
And so that means that my mom was experiencing God knows what through her body and through her brain and all of her different things. And then I just come out addicted to
Craig,
all of that stuff.
Just like, let's go, baby.
Yeah, 100% jonesing for it. And then creating everything I can in life to kind of get it.
Yeah.
And that's been a huge chunk of like, that's why fast forward to, what am I, 43 now? Mm-hmm. That's why it's like, okay, just sit in the bath for half an hour and don't do a fucking thing.
Yeah.
And the more that I'm able to relax and slow my body down and just be present with like the nothingness of doing nothing, it's like, that's the really uncomfortable thing for me now, right? It's not like we'll roll in jiu-jitsu and have fucking monster, terrible fucking rolls that are like super challenging and hard. And like, I think I'm dying underneath you. It was like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago when you're on top and you're belly down and your pressure was so incredibly strong. And I'm just like, I don't have anything left. I can't, everything that I'm trying to put forth in this moment. And I'm like, I can just go now.
Yeah,
this can just be the moment.
Goodbye, sweet world.
Like, this is it.
This is how I go.
I'm over. This is how it ended on a Saturday morning. With a friend.
Yeah, with a friend who's got me belly down, who's grinding into my back right now.
Right. And that still serves a massive purpose for me. Like, I still find, I mean, jiu-jitsu has been such a gift for so many different reasons. But the challenge now is the doing nothing part.
Yeah.
The challenge now is, can I set everything down and then be with myself and what I'm actually feeling and what comes up for me?
Yeah.
Because that chatter in my brain, that thing that we're talking about where it's like, I can't be still for 3 minutes and then I got to do something. For me, the reason why I can't be still for 3 minutes is because I can't quiet my brain.
Yep.
And it's like, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And if I can ride that wave out of like, you know, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Take care of this, take care of that. Then the next wave that comes in is all the processing of trauma and what's coming up for me and all the inner work and all the reflection. And then that brings up so many different emotions for me to kind of sit with and feel that it's like, oh, I got to fucking distract somehow. I got to get out
so
of
that
this
was going to be like, my question is like, when I feel like those things are coming on and you're like, oh, well, let's go find something else to do. Yeah. Like, oh, I can feel this emotion coming, right? And I've tried to, and it's hard, I think, sometimes to explain some of this stuff, right?
It's really hard. Well, you know what? I actually don't think it is hard. I think we're so limited in our ability to communicate this kind of stuff. Because the truth of it is, it's just fucking emotion. It's just feelings.
Yeah.
And like, it's
which
so
everybody
hard,
has.
So hard to explain.
It's like, no, you have like, 100%. Right? And I think that we all like visualize some of this stuff a little differently. Like, I think about, so when those feelings, those things come in, like for me, it's this shadow. It's this dark cloud that's like kind of rolling and I can see it come in. And then I'm like, I don't want to be here. You okay?
I got fucking pickleball hips, man.
Oh,
go ahead. Keep going.
But like, I see these things coming and you're like, let's avoid this, right? Like, I doom scroll, right? Like whatever else I can do to avoid some of that stuff. And it's hard because, and this is one of the reasons why I'm excited about this is, and like, as my wife and I have been discussing this, like, what do I think makes this so fun, right? And fun may not be, I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Right. But it's also going to be deep. And I think it's going to be important is we are different people, right? We do have a lot of shared experiences overall, like at the foundation, I believe, right? Your background in LEO, right? My background in the military, the things that happened and we had to deal with during that time. And then at the same time, like families and relationships and all this stuff. Jiu-jitsu obviously is important and like all this stuff. But it's hard sometimes to try to explain that to like my wife, right? Who we...
Explain what?
Explain like that shadow, right? We have different shadows in what those feelings that come up, right? A lot of hers are around like family and loss of family, right? She's had to deal with a lot of different things where she lost her mom almost like 20 years ago. She lost her dad 12, 13, 14 years ago. Grandparents and stuff like that. And it's really just she has a grandmother and her sisters and her brother, and she lost a sibling as well. So she's had all this traumatic loss.
Lots of grief, yeah.
Right? Lots and lots of grief. I had I lost a lot of grandparents when I was younger. I lost my dad when I was like 24, 25 or something like that, which was hard because I was overseas when that happened. So that created a whole nother like way to, how do you deal with this or not deal with this? But a lot of mine is more from those other traumatic experiences, my time spent serving in the military, childhood things, stuff like that, right? And so they're different shadows, and it's hard because she'll explain hers, and I'll be like, yeah, I understand why that's bothersome and all that. At the same time, in my brain, I'm like, okay.
Right.
You know, so I see hers, but it's different than mine, so it's hard for me to kind of make some of those connections.
Yeah.
But I feel like this is going to be, the word easier is not it. But I feel like it will be, the connection can be stronger in some of those things, right? Not that I don't have a connection with my wife, obviously. She's the light in the center.
Right.
Right.
I think about, when it comes to those, like, do you have a running list of like those shadow thoughts, experiences, memories that are almost like the greatest hits? So if I get quiet, things, you know, and then I start going to that place, or that place comes to me, then it's like, okay, now it's checking off the list of these things.
There are definitely there's a top 10 for sure, but then it's one of those like, this is a mixtape with like 100 different episodes in it, right?
All the greatest hits of shit show.
Yeah, all the greatest hits of shit shows, you know, like everything from like loss of other service members, guys I served with, responsibility in some of that, to, I mean, from like that aspect to just all the different things that happen within that, watching things, seeing things, you know, and it's like, yeah, you know, like part of that is, yeah, it's, I mean, I don't even think 100, if I like just quickly run through that Rolodex, like it's a big Rolodex, you know? And it's hard for me is you never know what little thing will trigger something, right? So like you're sitting there and all of a sudden you're like, whoop. And then it's like, and my wife, who I love to death, and I will just continue to say this all the time, but she's really, really good at seeing that. And
like when you get triggered?
100%.
Okay.
And she is so like, she's not just good at like recognizing that I'm being triggered in something, right? She knows the things that trigger me. So like, loud noises, constant, like a barrage of loud noises and stuff like that are an instant kind of like trigger for me and things. And if we're in the car and the kids are just going and the radio's on and all this stuff and it's just too much and there's more cars on the road than I'm used to or that I want or whatever, I feel like she has this sixth sense of like, Ben's about to start sweating. Right? Because that's like my body is like, and I'm sweaty.
Yeah.
She's like, Ben's about to start sweating. And she'll be like, hey, kids, let's keep it down, right? And she recognizes that stuff early and does a really good job of helping almost curate the removal of some of that stuff in my world. And it's silly, but it's even like when we walk into a restaurant, I notice it, she does it, and I appreciate every time when we walk in somewhere and like she walk up to the table, the server, hostess, whatever, will walk us to the table and she stands there for a minute and then I decide where I need to sit. And then, so as soon as I make my motion, she's like, cool, he's going to sit there and I sit here. Right. And it's a stupid thing, right? Like,
I don't think it's a stupid thing.
I know it's not a stupid thing. I think the sheepdog mentality that is like out there on the internet and all this stuff, like, oh, I don't turn my back to the door. Like, yeah, I don't have a problem if my back is to the door. I'm uncomfortable though. Yeah. Right. Like I prefer this.
I went through a process a few years back where, cause I'm the same way.
Yeah.
Right. Very much the same way where it's like, I would go into restaurants, building, I mean, anywhere. I'm going through life in any capacity, in any way. I'm constantly threat assessment.
Always.
And I got to the point where I trained myself to set it down.
Yeah.
And not be that way anymore. And so now when we go out to eat or we go somewhere, I find that if I'm activated, like if my nervous system is already on edge, then I'll default to that.
Yep.
But if I'm not, and my nervous system isn't, then I'm not, I don't even think about it anymore.
Gotcha.
Like it's kind of like we just show up and sit down.
Yeah.
And it's not an issue at all. But if I'm already kind of activated, stressed, if we, you know, it was traffic getting to the restaurant, or we're running late, or something triggered me in some capacity, right, in some way.
I'm not laughing at but it's like if there was traffic, if we're late, all these same things for me, right? You're like somebody drove aggressively 30 minutes ago, and I'm still on top.
Yeah, we were driving home the other day from pickleball. Hey, real quick, if you're just somebody that listens to podcasts, thank you. But if you want to watch us week after week, jump over to our YouTube channel. Just search out Brave Men Dare. Click that subscribe button. Don't forget the little notification bell, and come see what we're all about week after week on the podcast. We share tons of content there as well, and we even have some plans in the future to do some live episodes. So come subscribe to us on YouTube, and while you're at it, you might as well follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok as well. We hope you're enjoying this episode. Let's get back to it. And there was this fucking truck. Like, I love Tennessee. There's so many things. We could do a whole episode on it, right? Because this, you didn't grow up here. You didn't live here.
I grew up in Michigan.
Yeah.
But I did live in Tennessee when I was like 21
or 20. For a long time?
For a couple months. Okay. I was when I was a whitewater raft guide.
Okay.
Right. So I worked on the Ocoee.
Okay.
Yeah. So cool that I got, like, it's funny, when we moved here, I took Jamie to the Ocoee to show her, and we went to the Ocoee Dam restaurant and grill or whatever. I was like, hey, where's the Duff? And they're like, oh yeah, that burned down 16 years ago. And I'm like, oh.
Was that like the place?
It was a bar that sold, or like everything was in mason jars, and it was like 17 shanties like put together, right? They're like tin roof, and you could see outside through the inside. It was a great place.
Oh yeah.
I think.
Well,
my memories of it.
Right?
My memories of that.
It was amazing.
Yeah, it was great.
Totally legit.
Yeah.
But
so Tennessee's great, but there was a truck.
Yeah, there was a truck, and you know, in Tennessee they're not real big sticklers on like safety inspections.
Oh yeah.
And so it's been really interesting to see the level of vehicles that are driving around without, you know, it's just everything you could possibly imagine. And I thought I had seen a lot, but Tennessee opens up your eyes a bit. Anyways, I'm following one of those vehicles, and shit's falling off the back of it. And at one point, we got a chip in the windshield, and I don't know if it was from that vehicle or another vehicle that passed, but whatever the fucking reason, right? I saw the rock come up, chips the windshield. I'm just like, motherfucker. So I'm pissed at that point, frustrated. We get to a point where the road opens up, another lane, and I'm going to pass. And I start going to pass, and the guy gets over because we're trying to pass this diesel, and he's trying to accelerate, and he's in a shitty old truck. He's got a bed, and we're in Steph's Charger.
Oh, yeah.
And so I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm passing this guy, right? And it took a bit because we were going uphill. Anyways, I don't know if he was totally fucking around or not, but I'm doing like 110 and finally get in right at the last minute to get over in front of him to get around the diesel. And it totally freaked Steph out. Like,
she's like, what are you doing?
Yeah, she was really upset and frustrated. But what was I saying? I don't know why I brought this up. It's not important. Anyways, Tennessee, right?
Yeah. Well, hang on a minute now, because so I've been in those situations, right? And I've also been the other guy who's just putzing down the road, right? And I tend to be the non-aggressive driver, right? And I think that, like I explained it as, I've had that dopamine rush, right? Like I don't need to be aggressive, and I know what can escalate from here.
Oh yeah.
With road rage and all that stuff, right? And there's, especially like we have kids in the car. I'm like, my babies are in the car. Like, I don't need to piss somebody off on the road or anything like that. Jamie's a little different. But we will, like, I've totally been the guy who's like, no, I'm going to pass this guy. Like, my mission is now to pass this guy. And I've totally been the guy who was like, what's that asshole's problem? Right? Yeah. And you're like, it's that retrospect of like, what's your perspective of this? What's your view on this?
Yeah, the majority of the time, I'm pretty the chill guy. I'm pretty much like, I don't care. I'm in no rush to go anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in, but every now and then. Every now and then
you get a little like excited.
Yeah, I totally get a little excited. Like, it's nice to have a vehicle that can do it too.
Oh yeah, you're like Ricky Bobby.
That was part of the problem for a long time is we had that minivan and that thing's not going anywhere fast. And I love it and it's great and it's an amazing vehicle. But
you hit the gas and you're like,
it's not getting the fast lane and start passing people. So part of it's by default, right? Where I had to learn to be the slow guy. Yeah. I had to be like, I'm fine. I'm going at the pace of traffic or slower even. Who cares?
Yeah. Oh man, Jamie gets on me because I'm not in a huge rush, right? Hopefully we left early enough that I've accounted for the travel time and all that, so we won't be late. Because that's anxiety for me is to be a little late. But I'll like, oh, hey, we're getting off in 2 miles, and I'll get in the slow lane because I'm going to exit the highway or something. And Jamie's like, you're not getting off for 2 miles. I'm like, yeah, I'm just here now. She's like, but now you're stuck behind the semi. I was like, I could be in front of the semi. Like the 2 miles. I could go and be in front of the semi and get off that exit, or I could be behind the semi and get off the exit. Like, what's it matter?
Yeah.
The difference it wasn't, I remember I was in high school and a teacher made me do the math from this school that I went to a secondary school for half my day in high school. And I had to drive back and forth, but it was like 15 miles. And he's like, and he saw me one day on the road going 90 miles an hour, 80, 90, 100 mile an hour in my Ford Contour, right? Super cool car. And I'm driving and he's like, how much time did you save? I was like, what are you talking about? We got here super fast. He's like, you got here 30 seconds before I did. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, do the math. And he made me sit down. That was my we're going to sit here and do the math. And I was like, all right. So we did the math on the speed it takes and the time and all this. And we, and it comes out to over the course of 15 miles, going 20 miles an hour faster is a minute.
Yeah, it's never worth it.
Yeah, unless you're doing like a 8-hour drive. But even then, you're shaving off 30 minutes that you're probably going to have to deal with anyways later, right? It'll all work out. And there's no rush.
Yeah, it's never been worth it.
It's never been worth it.
I've always, I've gone over the years, because I used to, I remember when I got my license, I drove a ton with my permit. At the time, my oldest brother was in college, and it was a little junior college in Utah, and it was like a 2.5, maybe 3-hour drive there.
Okay.
And so we would go all the time, visit weekends, all that kind of stuff. And my mom would let me drive because I had my permit. So it's a great opportunity, and it's all, little highways and things like that, back roads in Utah. So it was super chill. And I got so comfortable driving, and I got a lot of time behind the wheel. I mean, she would fall asleep sometimes and I would still drive and everything was totally fine. And it made me really, really confident, but it also is like an adrenaline junkie teenager.
Yep.
Suddenly I get my license.
Yeah.
It was a shit show.
Same.
Just a nightmare. And I remember one time I was coming home from Salt Lake, because we grew up in this small town that was kind of out west from Salt Lake. It's a real rural community. And there was one highway or one freeway. It was I-80. It was the only way to come and go from Salt Lake. So you get on I-80 and you start heading home. It's a half-hour drive. And I would get in the fast lane in this fucking Ford Escort and just completely, pedal.
Just go.
Yeah. All the way to the floor. And my goal was I am not taking my foot off the gas, which meant if somebody was in the fast lane, I would pass people on the right.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a 2-lane freeway. Somebody's, 2 cars are continuing, and I can't pass them. I'm not taking my foot off this fucking gas.
So would you pass on the shoulder?
So I would pass on the shoulder because I had a mission.
Yeah.
I was like, I could do this.
43-year-old Craig is like, idiots.
Such an idiot.
What are you doing?
Such an idiot. I mean, there were so many times where I had a guy follow me off the freeway, pull into the, the little McDonald's, get out, go off on me, start. And I'm just like, oh, dude.
Yeah, whatever.
Get over it. What's the big deal? Nobody's hurt. Right. But I was crazy. I did so many things that's not to say I regret them, but.
They're experiences.
Well, they're definitely experiences. And I think about when it comes to not just crazy things that I've done or those moments in life where I feel like everybody's life is this way. Mm-hmm. It's like just one step to the left or one right turn or one, you leave 3 minutes before you were thinking you were going to. And I mean, it's over.
Changes everything.
It's done.
Yep. It's regret is one of those things that I think about, and I try to think and I tell myself this, and I want to believe this, that I don't have any regrets, because everything that has happened and every decision I've made has brought me to this chair right here. And I'm super thankful for everything for my family and for everything that I've experienced, good or bad, but it has made me who I am today. And I like who I am, right? So if I removed any of those stories or, things that have happened, then I would be a different person today.
Yeah.
Right. And then occasionally I say all that, and then I'm like, I might regret that. Like that little thing that happened, I might regret that part. Right. There are maybe not things that I can think of right now that I regret, but there are things definitely that I'm like, it might have been better if that didn't happen.
Yeah. I've got a ton of them. Because I think the same way, where it's like, I don't regret anything for the exact same reason, right? But I also get in my head about that, because I think that is also in some ways my excuse for not being able to deal with the consequences of some of the choices that I've made.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, I've made a lot of really bad decisions that haven't just hurt me,
other people,
but have hurt other people that I love.
Yeah.
And so then that's where it gets like really washy.
It does.
Where it's like, if I hadn't have made those decisions, then I wouldn't have, I think a lot about my kids. And, you've got your two kids and they're a little bit younger. My oldest is 25.
Yeah.
All of our daughters are in their early 20s. Our boy just turned 18. So my kids are a little bit older, and I've got a lot of experience with like being able to reflect back on what I did as a parent.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of decisions that I made as a parent that I regret.
Yeah.
And that is difficult, because those decisions shaped
someone else.
And they definitely shaped me as well.
Yeah.
Like the decisions that I regret making as a parent also shaped and molded me and put me in this chair where I'm at, gave me wisdom, gave me insight, allowed me to make better decisions in life. I definitely have learned from mistakes. All of those things are totally applicable. And my kids are bearing the brunt of it in some ways.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a hard one. But I do think that if I get real honest about it, I don't think I would change anything, but I think I do need to do more sitting in those uncomfortable spots where it's like, okay, those decisions and actions shaped and influenced my kids and my kids' lives.
Yep.
And that's really hard. And not just my kids, but partners and relationships and things like that as well.
Yeah. Back to, even though we can even take that all the way back, like what was going on in utero, right?
For my kids?
Yeah. Well, no, for you.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So like my mom and I have talked about this, right? Like rough childhood, lots and lots of like traumatic things that happened. Everything from violence to homelessness, like all of that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, my mom, who is like, she has to deal with like, I don't want to, like, this isn't me putting words in her mouth, but the idea of like all the decisions she made, all these things happened, right? And she can feel bad about that. But at the same time, all those experiences that I had as a child, right, I believe made me stronger, maybe more receptive to things, maybe more open to things, or even to the aspect of like when things aren't going well, right? I'm like, yeah, I got a roof over my head, I got clothes on my back, I got food in my belly, like it's gonna be okay, right? As long as like those kind of base, and even at that point, you're like, well, I don't have a roof over my head anymore. Like, well, I still got food in my belly, still got clothes on my back. And you're like, well, I ain't got no food. I'm like, well, I got a place to live, right? Like, we can get through, this too shall pass, right? And that's kind of the hard thing that I think about is like, you've got all this experience that happened to you that is traumatic and all this stuff, but it also is what has brought you to who you are today.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that it's obviously as we've got older, we're not 22 years 22, 25, 30 even, right? When you're in your 40s and you're like, yeah, like I can see all the upsides and downsides of all this, right? That difference between wisdom and knowledge.
For sure.
Right. I heard this. I love this little joke I heard, and it was some like, I don't know if it was a hockey player or a lacrosse player or something like that, but like knowledge is knowing that tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing that you don't put it in a fruit salad. Right. And I was like, that's balls it all up right there for me.
Right.
So
I think what would be fun, and what would be fun, we don't have to do it, but maybe what we can do is go back through and share some pivotal moments in childhood that we feel like at this point really had, when I say negative, but like what were some of the really challenging moments from childhood that you feel like had shaped, granted, we might see it different now as the men that we are today.
Yeah.
But we had a bunch of things that we had to learn because of this thing, right? Where this thing kind of stuck and held on through adolescence and teenage and young adulthood.
Yeah.
What were some of those things for you that stand out? Maybe one or two that.
Yeah. I mean, God, one or two.
As many as you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, literally like going back, I remember, I think there was an entire, I want to say when I was like 8, I might have been 7. We went a whole year without electricity.
Okay.
Like we just couldn't afford it. I think I might have shared with you like the time I watched my dad grab my brother, who my dad had been drinking, got called home from the bar because my brother, who was 18, had been drinking, right, and gotten pulled over and went to jail. And my dad came home and grabbed my brother. We were sharing in the same room and just destroyed my brother. I mean, just like threw him across the room, like, and maybe he didn't throw him. In my brain, as 7 or 8 years old, he threw
that's
him.
what it would look like as a 7 or 8 year old.
Yeah. That parents getting divorced, right? Some like that was going from like, we're all a happy family to I shared a little 2-bedroom apartment with my mom and my 2 sisters. Sleeping in like the living room, stuff like that.
How old were you when they got divorced?
They got separated when I want to say 9.
Okay.
And then I think they got divorced officially when I was like 11 or 10 or 11 or 12 or something like that. There was numerous times where they tried to like reconcile things. It just never worked out. And for a lot of like, my dad was probably one of the nicest, kindest men that you'll ever meet, but had an addiction, was addicted to substances and alcohol.
Would you say he was an alcoholic?
Oh yeah, he would. No, there's no doubt. Yes, he was an alcoholic.
Okay.
Yeah, no doubt he was an alcoholic. But so like going through that and then having just that, like when you have an alcoholic parent, it ebbs and flows, right? You're like, yeah, this is great. And even the stuff, it's so funny because I think about this now and you're like, at the time, like going back, you're like, what the hell? Like my mom smoked cigarettes. I think she smoked like Newports or Pall Malls or something like that, right?
Yeah.
My dad smoked weed.
Okay.
Right? And it wasn't one of those dad went in the backyard and had a joint. I would be with my father going on a Saturday to the motorcycle shop that he worked at, and he'd be smoking a joint in the truck on the dead of winter with the heat on, and I'm just sitting there hotboxing it up, right? And I'm like, and now I think about that, I'm like, oh my God, right?
Can you imagine just throwing the boy in the back and being like, hold on,
right? Yeah. Or even, I mean, but like even some of those small things that like nowadays it would be headline news almost. My dad always drove Ford F-150s, and old F-150s had a vent in where your feet go, right? Yeah, in the floorboards that you could open it and you could see outside, right? And it was just a vent and I used to play on the floorboards and play with that vent when we were driving down the highway, right? Like no seatbelts, no nothing, just sitting on the floor in the truck, just having a good old time.
Yeah.
I remember my mom had gone through a bunch, right, and trying to take care of us and be a single mom and all that stuff. She had gotten to a point where life was starting to go good. We had leased an Escort. We had then leased a minivan, and then she bought a Suburban. We had gone from an apartment to a townhome to my mom bought a double wide, right? And it was like, sweet. We were in a nicer trailer park, right? But a double wide, she owned it. And then we got the Suburban, and we're like, life's not bad. She had started her own business with somebody else, and it failed. And within a month or two, we were homeless. I mean, literally, like, car got repoed. We borrowed somebody's like 89 Cherokee or not, Cherokee, and like borrowed vehicles for a while until we got our first like police auction, like $180 vehicle. And we, for 2 years, I lived in my buddy's living room. We split up for a while. We're like, hey, I don't know who's going to take care of you. Just because there was no option, right? Slept in my aunt's basement for, half a year, other random houses and boyfriends and anything that we could to like have that roof over our head. And through that whole process, you're like, it's so funny because I had only put all this together 6 weeks ago, maybe not even 3 weeks ago. I work with small business owners and I'm very passionate about them. I've been a small business owner. And why am I so passionate about this? Because I see what happens when it goes wrong.
Right.
Right. I know that if I'm working with somebody and this is like, they're trying to live the American dream and they're trying to do this and it fails, what happens? I know the consequences of this. So those things, being homeless, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, those are some of the like things that stick out just right off the top of my head.
What do you feel like? Because there's a bunch there, Ben. There's like, you've got, 7 or 8 years old, and my dad beats the shit out of my brother in front of me, and I'm witnessing that, and I'm watching that. And that's probably not the first time that you see violence.
No.
Right?
No. Yeah.
That's probably a normal experience.
Pretty normal, yeah. So like my dad was like was an alcoholic, but also was a biker, right? I'd seen like my dad had 3 belly buttons because he had stab wounds, right? Like my dad did a lot of like work release, so he would come home Monday night through Thursday night,
okay,
and then the weekends went to jail, right? Did that for a couple of years,
okay.
Definitely watched lots of violence. Never watched my dad lay a hand on my mom.
Okay.
So that was one thing that as I grew up, even at the youngest age, was my dad would like, he's like, we don't put our hands on women. It's just not a thing that we do. He's like, doesn't matter what they do. And I remember watching my mom, who is small. My mom's like 5 foot tall. My dad was like 6'3" or 6'2", right? Big biker. Mm-hmm. I watched my mom like just try to destroy my dad, like throwing stuff at him as he's walking through the house and all this. And the only thing he did is he was blocking his path as he grabbed her like under the armpits and like put her on the bed, like threw her on the bed and then like walked past her, like, stop, I'm leaving. And so he never raised a hand to her. I got spankings, but he never beat me because I left the, refrigerator door open or something like that. But he fucked up my brother pretty good numerous times. And my brother, who I love, he is my brother. I don't have a very strong relationship with him anymore. We have never really been super close, but he's made a lot of mistakes, right? It was really hard. We just reconnected for the first time in like 12 years.
Really?
A couple, yeah.
Like how recently? Don't tip the set.
I know, right? You're gonna break it.
The shit's not bolted down.
I want to say like literally 2 months ago.
Wow.
I was listening to a song, and it was a song. It's that Cat Stevens, Man in the Fiddle, or whatever. It's a song about a dad, right? And I was listening to it. My dad and I always like that song. And
it's not Cats in the Cradle, is it?
Yeah. Cats in the Cradle. Yeah.
You're like a man in a fiddle.
Yeah, I was so off.
A man in a fiddle.
But I was thinking about it, and it made me think about my dad, and then it made me think about my brother. So my dad died in 2010 I was in Afghanistan, came home, and my brother was just literally just cracked out.
Okay.
He was drugs, just all kinds of messed up things. And he
was it in relation to your dad?
No, like they were doing it together.
Oh, okay.
They were like, and this is other like things that make you sad, right? Like when I found out that he had died, I finally got home and went to go like to his place. No electricity, no heat. It's the dead of winter in Michigan. Like it's not the dead. It was like end of October, so it's cold.
Pretty close,
right? Pretty close. Yeah, it's still Michigan, right? It doesn't get super hot there. And he had never like mentioned anything. If he would, and at the time, I was in the Marine Corps, and he had sent me money when I was a kid, and I had sent him some money. I would have sent him some money to pay some bills or whatever. But my brother was super cracked out and like emptied his wallet, took his debit card, was buying stuff, stole his truck or his Jeep that he had. And that was literally like, we met at an Applebee's, and I like basically was like, hey, I told the server or the hostess, I was like, hey, you should call the cops. There's going to be a fight. And went and sat down and waited for him. And he was just like, and we argued a little bit about who was handling what. And he was just I was like, listen, it doesn't matter what happens right now. I have a piece of paper in my pocket that says I'm a U.S. Marine on home from Afghanistan on emergency leave to take care of my father who just passed. And this is my brother who's got bench warrants. I know how this is going to go. I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right. But so we haven't really talked since 2010. We became Facebook friends at some point in the last like 7-8 years, but that was it. I think he had done something. He'd won like Apprentice of the Year as a 50-year-old man, right? Won Apprentice of the Year as like a lineman or something like that, right? Got into like a trade. I was like, good job, right? That was my comment to him. So I called him just a couple of weeks ago. I was like, or 2 months ago, and I just sent him a text message. I was like, hey, is this Charles? Is this Charlie Tim? He's like, yeah, who is this? I was like, it's your brother. And he's like, what's up, brother? And like we talked on the phone, and it's the same.
Yeah.
He like, I felt bad because at one point he shared, he's like, yeah, I got that Tim curse. And I'm like, what curse? Like, I worked my ass off and I've got a great life. Like, what curse? And him just talking about his in and outs with drugs and alcohol and ruining relationships. And he's a truck driver now and like
living very similar to sounds like your dad, right?
Yeah.
Very similar.
Very
life.
similar. And that's like, as soon as I reached out and because I had this anger with my brother through how my dad had passed and all this stuff. And I had this unanswered anger towards him. And unfortunately for me, I have 3 siblings. I have twin sisters that are younger than me, and I have an older brother who's a half brother. He's 10 years older than me.
Okay.
And I just have this like anger towards him. And as soon as we talked on the phone, that all left me. And I was like, I hope you do well, man. And that was really like my piece to him, and he's like, oh, and it's so silly. Cause he's like, hey, well, I come through Tennessee. He's like, let me know and we'll hang out. I was like, yeah. I was like, and my wife was like, you're not inviting him here. I was like, no, I'll meet him at Applebee's again. Right. But like he hit me up and he's like, hey, I'm in Tennessee. How close are you to Nashville? I'm like, I'm 3.5 hours away, man. I'm not driving to see you right now. And he's like, okay.
Yeah.
But
what was your, because you said you reached out to him.
Yep.
What was driving that? What was the thing that sparked that, you think?
I honestly just I was relaxing. I was working on stuff in my garage, and I tried to think to myself, like, why do I have this emotion, this anger towards him? Mm-hmm. Is this really like, do I need to carry this around? Can I bury the hatchet? He is my brother, right? We don't look a lot alike, but we share a father, right? We lived together. I remember tearing his cigarettes up when I was a kid because he was smoking, and I thought that was bad, which then I ended up smoking, but I remember the first time I played Mario Brothers was with him, right? And I think the first time I ever got high was with him, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so he's my brother, and I love him because we have all these shared experiences, but I had this anger. And as I was sitting there and I was listening to this song, and I was like, why am I carrying this around? Like, can I forgive him for these things? Can I let this go? Do I need this? negativeness in my body, in my mind. And as soon as I texted him and we got on the phone, it was just this like, why was I so upset? You know, like, yeah, he did something shitty. He was an addict, right? An alcoholic, like who's just always done the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And it hasn't, other than like the situation of my father dying, like he died of a heart attack. My brother didn't kill him, right? Are there things that might have helped? Like, yeah, probably, right? But at the same time, I just had all this upsetness with him. And as soon as I talked to him, I was like, yeah, why am I holding on to this? You know, like, hey, man.
What was the anger underneath it? Do you think you did blame him in some ways for your dad?
I didn't blame him. I definitely, let me rephrase that. Yes, I did. Okay. I looked at my father, who we all knew was an alcoholic who made poor decisions, like instead of paying the electric bill, would go buy a 6-pack.
Yeah.
Right. So in that case, I was like, all right, well, I was mad at my brother for not making sure that my dad was okay and not being the son who should take care of your parents, right? Like, not saying that that's your child's job or anything like that, but if you see your parents struggling, I believe that you should do everything you can to help them. And he didn't do that. And then the idea that like my dad died and my siblings took the 3 or 4 ounces of weed that he had, and I was like, who he owed money for that I had to cover, right? So here I am on leave from the Marine Corps from Afghanistan, and I'm driving over to a guy who I grew up with whose name is Charger Face, right? 100%. I don't actually, my mom knows what his real name is. It's like Lawrence or something like that. But
well, of course it's Lawrence, right?
Yeah.
I'd go with Charger Face.
Yeah, Charger Face. It sounds way cooler, right? Taser Face. And I had to go pay him because when my dad died, Charger went and got all of my dad's tools from the shop he was working in, because my dad was a mechanic, went and got all his tools and held his tools as collateral for the debt that my dad owed.
For his weed?
For his weed. Which apparently, I didn't know at the time, was total shit weed, right? And Charger's like, yeah, you owe me $300 for all this. And I was like, here I am in this guy's house that I remember when they built it. Right. And this guy who's had dozens of surgeries, whose life has just been really fucking hard. And I'm like, fine. So I here's $300. Give me my dad's fucking tools. Like, I'll settle these debts. And that's what I had to do, is I had to go settle all my dad's debts, basically, and take care of all this stuff. We had to go through probate. Like, my brother was playing, what is the card game where you move it around? 3-card Monte.
Okay.
Right. My brother was playing 3-card Monte with my dad's body. Which sounds crazy. And that's literally I was calling morgues and funeral homes trying to find my dad. Because when the coroners came and got him, right, they took him, and my brother said, hey, I'm his son. I would like him to go here, and then didn't tell anybody. And because I showed up days later, because it takes a couple days to get back from Afghanistan, they're like, who are you? I was like, I'm his son. And they're like, well, you should know where you did this. And so I had to go to probate because my dad didn't have a will. He didn't have an executioner of any of this stuff. So I had to go to probate and explain to some judge real quick, like, listen, I'm trying to square this shit away. You got to give me the power to do that.
Yeah.
So they were like, okay, emergency, maybe the execution, not executioner. Is it execution? Executive.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Definitely not execution.
Definitely not, right? I was like, that's the wrong word. But they put me in charge, and I said, okay. And then but at that time, I had to go around and figure out where my dad was. Oh, God. And this is where we're bringing all these things up, right? Yeah. So we had a memorial for my father. They waited, my dad grew up, was a biker, right? And Ron Finch, who I grew up with, it was Uncle Ronnie, is a Indian Larry in the motorcycle world. He is a well-renowned custom motorcycle builder.
Okay. What's his name? Ron Finch?
Ron Finch, yep. So he's got a whole exhibit, or he did, I don't know if he still does, at the Detroit Museum, or the Detroit Art Institute. He's got a whole wing. It's all him. A big metal thing. Like he welds, he makes crazy things, right? Super. He's the Ozzy Osbourne of motorcycles.
Cool.
Okay. Talks like Ozzy Osbourne. But we had a party, we had a memorial at his place, at his like studio, and my brother had said like, hey, we don't know how we're going to cover all this. Right. Now, I had said when I found out, I was like, hey, don't worry about it. I got it. Right. Like I was in the military. I was in Afghanistan. I was getting paid and I was buying cans of Copenhagen and Monsters. Right. Like I wasn't spending my money on anything.
Yeah.
And I had no bills. So I was like, I got the money. It's not a big deal. Well, they passed around a bucket to everybody at the memorial to collect donations to take care of the cremation and all that on my dad. And when the bucket came by, I was like, what's this for? And they're like, oh, it's to help you guys pay for all this. And I was like, I don't need your charity. Like, I appreciate that all these people want to help, but I don't need your money. And my brother, who's cracked out at the time, comes up afterwards and he's like, let me get that money. And at least Ron and Ruth, Ron's wife, Ruth, knew me well enough and knew my dad well enough that they were like, no, we're not giving you this money, Charlie. We'll talk tomorrow and we'll discuss where this is going to go. And I was like, all right. And it had always been known that like when my dad died, I was going to get his motorcycle. And my brother's like, no, it's mine. And I was like, I will murder you, right? Like, there's no chance you're going to take this from me. That's been my birthright since I was born. Like, that's mine. So the next day we showed up and he never showed. But I felt bad because Ron and Ruth had to go through this weird experience of we collected all this money from this memorial we had for this guy who was a friend of ours. And we've got, it was like $1,700 or something like that. And they're like, well, we don't want it. And I was like, well, I don't want it. Give it. And they're like, well, we can't give it back. So they gave it to me. So now I've got $1,700 in cash. And what am I going to do with all this cash?
Yeah.
Right. So I had to go through this whole experience of all these different things. And it was a huge pain in the ass.
And you're 26?
Something like that. Yeah. I mean, it was 2000, it was 14 years ago. Yeah, it's 26.
26 years old.
26 years old. Having to like handle all this stuff. Like,
yeah, that's so much, dude.
Yeah.
Especially by yourself, right? It wasn't like you had anybody else helping you with it for the most part.
Yeah. My mom was super supportive in this, and she'll always say, like, she's like, I always loved your father. She's like, I just couldn't be in love with your father.
Yeah.
Right. And her, at the time, boyfriend, now husband, right, I was staying in his house. A girl who I had dated on and off for years, who lived in Michigan, was like, hey, I'll be here for you. And so, like, we fell back into that routine, ended up getting married from all that. And my sisters weren't really around. Like, one of them lived in Vegas. The other one was like, yeah, I'm not super interested in any of this. Like, so I just tried to take care of it all. And it's hard because there's a lot of things that like my sister Jessie, who still lives in Michigan, is a tattoo artist. She, I believe, has my father's ashes.
Okay.
Right. And it's not a huge ordeal for me. Like, what am I going to do with them? Like, I don't need the ashes to remind me of my father. I can look like I have this tattoo here. This was something that he had.
Okay.
And that reminds me of my father every day. But like all of his shirts and stuff, like, I don't need any of that stuff, right? I have the motorcycle.
Oh, do you still?
I do. It's
good.
It's been fully painted. Ron gave it a really nice paint job. It's been sitting there for 14 years undone. One of these days I will finish it when
It's so interesting, dude. It's like because there's I mean, I'm reflecting back on everything that you're talking about and sharing, and then I'm kind of like visualizing this story that you're painting, right? You're talking about this time period in your life and this experience that you've gone through. And it feels like, that I think that's a good example of these experiences in life where you kind of just have to put your head down and get through it. And
what do you
go ahead.
No, what do you got? You guys call it something. What do you say?
I don't know. What do we say?
Don't you say something?
We say a lot of things.
That's true.
Put your head down and get through it.
Yeah. Oh, it was something. Somebody just said something to me like, yeah, you just got to chop wood or something like that.
Oh, yeah. It's chop wood, carry water.
Yeah, chop wood, carry water. Yeah.
This is a little bit different. Like chop wood, carry water is something that at least in the way that I use it, It's something that I'm consciously doing. It's like the discipline to show up and do the work every day, right?
Okay, yeah.
Where I know that my job today is I got to go outside and I got to chop wood and I got to carry water.
I got
you. If I want heat and if I want water, if I got to take care of my family, this is what I got to do.
See, I
got to go out and do that with
they're
discipline.
very similar for me, though. Like, it's what you have to do.
Yes.
Put your head down.
In the example that or not the example, but in the experience of losing your dad and having to navigate all of that, yes, those are things that you have to do.
Yeah.
But you're kind of like putting your head down and getting through that experience.
Yeah.
When truthfully, there's this massive amount of grief that needs to be felt and processed. So then you've got all of these little fucking annoyances, all these little dumb, things that got in the way of that experience of being able to just literally sit and process through the grief of what this experience was. Right. And that, I think, is what happens oftentimes is we'll have these traumatic experiences, we'll have these difficult experiences, we'll have these times in our life where truthfully we don't know how to allow space for them. We rush through them, but it's like an event like that, losing your father, requires, I think, right, this level of processing. To be able to not make peace. It's not like it has nothing to do with like you have to do it or this is how to do it healthy. It's none of that. It's just from like, I think of it from the idea of it's energy expenditure inside of my body. And that stuff sits in my body up until the point I either die or I allow it to be felt and processed. So there's this big chunk of emotion, of energy, of an experience that's in your body that has to be processed and felt through. And ideally we do it, not necessarily all at the same time, but you don't have to get it all out at once, but you also have to allow yourself the opportunity to let all of those things be felt, let all of those things process. But when you have an experience like that, where you're responsible for everything and you're trying to take care of everything and then you're dealing with brother and there's too much in the way to allow for that grieving process to take place, or the healing process, the emotionality of all of it. And then what is the compounding effects of all of that shit in your body over the course of your life? Because it's not just when I'm 26 years old and I lose my dad, it's when I'm 7 years old and I see my dad beat the shit out of my brother. It's all of these experiences compounding where it's like, hey, excuse me, I've got some shit that I need to feel. Is there anybody? Oh, nobody knows how to do this. Nobody's aware of what this process looks like. Cool. I'll just put this in the vault where the filing cabinet kind of goes, and we forget about it.
Stuff that shit.
down. There's so much.
Just never let us see the
There's so much.
That's how we deal with things, right?
Well, that's how I have. That's how I was taught how to deal with things. That's how I've seen things being dealt with, right? And then fast forward through 20s and 30s, all of that stuff eventually starts to come out in all of these really terrible, terrible ways. And so, I mean, we could talk a lot more about that. I think that's probably,
it's definitely going to be a conversation.
Yeah. I think there's a lot there, obviously, for you. And I appreciate you sharing it. When you were talking, I don't remember when you were talking about it, whether it was last weekend or something like that. I'm like, oh, interesting. Suddenly I see a side of Ben that, because there's a part of me that I love the human experience, right? I love hearing about how people process things. I've always been really fascinated by how we work as people, right? How we do things and how people do things. And like, I always want to know what's going on behind the scenes, because that to me is a really clear, like, that's how I process my own stuff. But that's also kind of how I look at people, as I'll see somebody and I'm like, oh, cool. I'm seeing the thing that you're presenting and I'm gathering all of that information. But then oftentimes what you're presenting to me is influenced and shaped by things that are behind that. And I want to know what those things are. So when you talked about that the other day, I was like, interesting. That's definitely something that I'm curious about, what's underneath all of that and what's behind that. Has there been anything similarly in the course of our relationship that you've picked up from me? You're like, that's an interesting thing. I'm curious what's behind that.
I definitely, So when we first met, right, I was like, okay. And for me, like I see this, what you're presenting, right? This is...
Here's the forward-facing Craig.
Forward-facing Craig, right? This is my perspective of Craig, right? And for me as a physical kind of person, right? Like I look at your size. Craig's got hair, right? Like how you carry yourself, how you interact with other people. So all these things is what I start to build this avatar of Craig in my brain, right? Yeah. And then as we talk about things, I'm like, okay. And I tend not to probe because I don't want to ask somebody a question that they don't want to go into, right? So like when we talked about like your experience in LEO, right? I was like, okay, you shared. And like, I was like, all right, that's all Craig wants to share here. So, and it's funny because it's definitely one of those things. Somebody shared this the other day. They were talking about you guys shooting, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right. And you were at the Madonnas. Yeah. Right. Shooting. And like how you were like a little move around a tree, a little of this, a little moving. And I think Michael was like, oh, shit. Like, Craig knows what to do here. And I was like, and as soon as he said that, I hadn't really put you in that scenario in my brain. That wasn't part of the picture I had painted.
Yeah. We just want to pause real quick and thank you for tuning in and listening to Brave Men Dare. We'd like to ask you to do 3 simple things for us. First and foremost, just subscribe wherever you're listening, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the other places you can find podcasts. By subscribing, you're going to help the podcast reach more people. Also, feel free to rate the show. Give us 5 stars if you're enjoying it. And last but not least, send an episode to a friend. All of these things are going to help the podcast reach more people and help us continue to bring you episodes week after week. Be sure to come follow us on social media as well. You can find us everywhere by searching Brave Men Dare. Now let's get back to the episode.
But it didn't surprise me at all because I knew a little bit more about your experience as a police officer and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that totally makes sense. Like, I wouldn't... If somebody was like, hey, who knows how to handle this kind of thing, you might not have been on the list that I drafted.
Yeah.
Right?
That makes me happy.
Yeah.
Because that means that my forward facing doesn't have any of that anymore.
Yeah. See, and I think that's an area where I definitely present more as a veteran, stuff like that. You know, like I brought my veteran hat, right? That was something that I was thinking about. But I definitely look at, as I learn more about you, I find it's this, I do a lot of visualization for how these things feel for me. I build visual models for them in my head.
What do you mean?
Okay, so I know Craig.
Yeah.
A year ago, I could, in my brain, Craig is a 3-dimensional person. But as soon as I peel back that outer skin, there's nothing in there because I just know what you're presenting as. And then as I learn more about you, right, the insides of that model start to build.
Okay.
Right? Now, when I visualize you, thinking about you, buddy, in my... Let me tell you about
Ben's
that.
Just staring at the wall. What are you doing? I'm visualizing Craig right now. Jamie's like, okay, whatever.
All right, yeah, it's like, so breakfast? When you come up when you enter my consciousness, quickly I see you built.
Okay.
Right? And I see all these little blocks that go in. To me, you're still I want to say 30% picture, but I actually think it's closer to like 15.
Yeah.
Right? And I see this 15%. It's the outer skin. And there's some blocks missing here and there, right? But it's 15% of you is completed. And that's what I see. So as we've been going through things and I'm learning things, did something happen?
You just had a camera glitch.
No.
That's a first. We're good.
The Matrix.
Right?
Are we living in a simulation? That's what I'm visualizing. Yeah.
I think we are.
Yeah. Oh, we'll have to talk about that.
Yeah. Keep going.
Okay. So I see you built out, right? And as we have more and more stories, that starts to fill in these gaps. Because I try never to assume. It's one thing that I really do my best to avoid is assuming things.
Yeah.
Right? Until I've heard them. And I think your average person can put things together. Right? Like, okay, I know this, and this I can make this connection here.
See, I think I agree with you, but I think the average person, or I think everybody does that, where we fill in the gaps of the things that we don't know. But I think that the majority of the time, those things are like way off because we're filling in those gaps with our own perception.
Oh,
so you're shaping and molding me based off
on what
of
I know.
You.
Yeah,
and so. I mean, some of them are probably spot on, right? There's probably some that are like, oh, yeah.
Well,
right.
You're going to get something right.
Exactly.
Right.
But I think that the majority of the time, because I think about this too, where, very similarly, I've got a picture of Ben, and the more time that we spend together and our relationship and everything like that, I start to fill in more of these puzzle pieces. I kind of think of it more as like a puzzle,
okay,
where I'm putting together the pieces of you, right?
Yeah.
So that I get a clear picture of who you are. And I get more pieces and we put them together and I'm like, oh, yeah. And some of them I can fill in the gap, right?
Yeah.
Some stuff you've shared with me, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's fucking piece right there.
Yeah.
I know where that piece goes.
Yeah.
And then there's other stuff that I'm sure I'm going to get surprised by, that I'm like, oh, I didn't even see that part of the puzzle. And then the puzzle becomes this 3-dimensional thing too, where it's not just putting together a puzzle, but I get a full understanding of who somebody is. And I definitely have to get better at like assuming.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at that. I'll definitely put people into a box.
You're bad at assuming?
It's not, well, I don't take it as like assumption maybe is the wrong thing, but I will, I'll decide something about somebody.
Okay.
And then that's it. That's who they are. That's what it is.
Gotcha.
I've got that assumption, and now that's that person.
Gotcha.
And I have to be really diligent about not doing that.
Yeah.
I have to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
I have to look past my judgments. Otherwise, I keep people in boxes.
Yeah.
I did it with you in the beginning. So like when we met, I tried really hard because I had awareness of this thing, I don't know how many years ago. When it comes to like men, I have terrible relationships with men. I've got a long history of, struggling in friendships with men and things like that. But one of the things that is really challenging for me is when I meet a man, I size him up immediately.
Yeah.
And it's one of two categories. It's I can either kill you or I can't. And if I can kill you, then I'm much more relaxed and everything's cool and everything's fine. And we're just kind of like, whatever, right? But it's this, what I realized is what it does is it sets up this weird dynamic in relationships with people, because it puts me, I know why I do it. I know that it's this coping mechanism from childhood. I know that it's how I've kept myself safe.
Yeah.
All of these kind of different factors and variables, but it sets up this weird like dichotomy in relationships, and also just in my own perspective of relationships, where I'm not giving that person, not only not giving them the benefit of the doubt, but it's like there's so much more to a person.
Oh, yeah.
There's so much more to relationships. There's so much more, to life itself. And so I have to really focus on not doing that and trying to like set that default mode to the side and just do the best that I can to see the person as a whole.
Yep.
But when I'm activated, when I'm triggered, when my nervous system is fried, when I'm already feeling anxious or afraid about a situation or something like that, then I will just default to that, because that's how I protect myself. And it's funny, when we started the episode, I was thinking one of the questions I was going to ask you, but it's like, how much can you learn about a person from jiu-jitsu, from rolling with them, right?
I think I've heard
Because initially when you and I start, it's the same thing with everybody in jiu-jitsu. I know it's not necessarily the same thing with everybody, but you're picking up on, first and foremost, like where their jiu-jitsu's at and kind of what their
game is and all that,
level
what
is,
do they
right?
see?
And it's really quick.
Yeah.
It's really quick. As soon as you start rolling with somebody, you know immediately whether or not you're better than them. And then it's just kind of like, cool, now I know how to navigate that experience, right? And when you and I started rolling, I think we were both doing that thing of like wanting to allow the other person the opportunity to kind of just feel comfortable, I guess, or feel safe. I don't know what, maybe that's sugarcoating it. Maybe we were both just like testing the waters to see what was there.
I think we were both testing the waters,
right?
Because it's one of those, like, there's capability.
Yeah.
I think we both recognize there's capability.
Yeah, like when, I don't think people were like, have you met Ben yet? But everybody talks about, the big guys in class. And so everybody was like, oh, you're going to like so-and-so. They're another big guy.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, cool.
It starts to build this kind of like...
Yeah, like, you know, you get a sense of the person before you actually meet them, and then obviously before you roll with them. And I remember thinking, I'm like, interesting. It's going to be interesting. I'm always interested to roll with somebody who has good jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And then when you add in size to it, it's a whole other variable, right?
100%.
Yeah, you can take really mediocrity in jiu-jitsu and you add some strength and some size to it, and suddenly you got a problem on your hands.
Yeah.
So I was interested. And then when we start rolling, I'm like, okay. And then I don't think it might have been the first roll, but it was not long.
Yeah.
It was not long before both of us were just like, okay. And I'm like, okay, fuck.
Yeah.
Here we go. And I think there's a part of that where I had to, because you challenged the part of me. And truthfully, it's a little kid part of me. Like that whole thing of like me sizing up people on whether or not I can hurt them or they can hurt me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a little kid. That's for me, that's where it starts.
But it starts there, but I think I do it.
Right.
I would even say that it's a constant, like every person that I meet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think I'm not doing it out of like anger or any kind of like I want to hurt anyone, but it's part of my like, how do I feel control in this environment? 100%. I'm not physically afraid of any of you. Like
100%.
Yeah.
Right?
So it makes me feel safer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I've analyzed it and I've thought about it and I've picked it apart. It's something that I've had a lot of work on processing, because for me at this point in my life, it's not necessary. I don't have any experiences. I'm not moving through the world where I need to worry about any of that stuff. And of course, there's always the added thing of like, well, you never fucking know. And and I'm like, yeah, I get that. And in the event that something happens and
I can fall back
I have
to
to
this.
do something, of course, right? I've got something in my pocket.
Yeah.
But day in and day out, I don't have to worry about sizing up threats and people. And so I've really had to like a concerted effort to shut that part of my brain off. That's a default mode that I have from childhood. And part of what I've learned in processing all of it, at least for myself, was going back and seeing where it started and going back and seeing what was going on in my life. And for me, it is very much in childhood. I had two older brothers. One of them could beat me up and I could beat up the other one. So even though they were both older, right? One of them was always bigger and stronger than me. And then my other brother, Brian, who's in the middle, I, at some point younger in life, I don't remember, maybe 6, 7, 8, 9 years old.
Yeah.
It was clear that I was crazy enough and wild enough and could tolerate enough pain that I could fuck him up. And that has been kind of the mold that I've used to shape all relationships with men from that point forward. And I've seen how that has hurt relationships with men. And I've seen like men who don't think that way or who don't operate that way. It doesn't, I had a guy tell me once, it was our yoga teacher. I was describing this thing that we're talking about right now. And he was like, yeah, when you said that, when you brought that up, when you communicated that, like, I didn't feel safe around you. Like that didn't make me feel good. And I'm like, interesting.
Yeah.
I would have never thought that, and it's silly. Like some guy who's like, yeah, I think about whether or not I can kill people. Like, yeah, that doesn't make me feel safe either.
Yeah.
I don't want to be hanging out with the guy that's like, yeah, everybody that I meet, I decide whether or not I can kill him or I can't. I'm like, fucking weirdo, right? That's a fucking psychotic person. But I had never seen it through that lens, because in my mind, it's all about safety.
Yeah.
It's how I assess whether or not I can be comfortable in this position and comfortable in this space. So when we started rolling in jiu-jitsu, it became apparent that there was some gray area. And typically what I do when there's one of two things that I'll do. And this is so fascinating, Ben. I mean, I don't know if it's like fascinating, but
I'm fascinated.
It fascinates me, right? Because if I encounter a man who can hurt me, who can physically dominate me, who, if it came down to it, who could kill me, then I will either completely like that person then becomes like this thing that I idolize and I put up on this pedestal, and then I kind of like acquiesce to them.
Okay.
I don't want to say in a submissive way, but it's like, that's kind of what I do. I guess it is in a submissive way. I say I don't want to say that. But,
yeah, I wouldn't call it submissive.
And then,
because I get it.
Right. And then the next thing is, so that's one default mode there. But the other one is like, fuck that guy. Right. Yeah. Fuck that guy.
So is that,
well, that's kind of because as we started to hang out and learn a little bit more about each other and stuff like that, you started to fall into that category of like, fuck that guy. And what I had to do was really take time to reflect on what that was bringing up in me, why I was feeling that way, right? Because it might have started with like, okay, can this guy physically hurt me or dominate me in a sense? And then all of the things, like all of the stories that I started to tell myself about you in order to make myself feel better about just that one little tiny factor of like, you might be more physically stronger and capable than I am. How do I then make peace with that inside of myself? And the way that I would make peace with that is fuck that guy. Make that guy the problem. Yeah. Knock that guy down. Right.
Bring him down a peg or two.
And all of that dynamic, all of that processing, I feel like is so fucking toxic and unhealthy for me. It serves me no purpose other than to create these relationships with really unhealthy dynamics in my head and between us, and it does nothing to serve. It serves no purpose in actually getting to know a person, and actually being able to develop a relationship with somebody. And so I've had to really learn how to set it down and kind of not push it away, but create a new dynamic, a new default. And that's so much of what life has been for me lately. And by lately, I mean like the last 5, 6, 7 years. Is it's like recognizing what are my default modes of moving through life, and do I want to keep those? Yeah. Are those things that are still serving me? Because the majority of them come from childhood. Yep. That's where they started, and some of them I can put the pieces together and understand. Some of them I'm still trying to figure out and kind of like get the nuance of, because a lot of it's shadow, right? It's the subconscious ways that we move through the world that I'm trying to understand mine, so that I can decide whether or not that's something that's still serving me. Because I am at a phase in my life where I'm not in danger anymore. Yep. I'm not threatened. Like there's not a lot of like masculinity that I feel challenged by. Yep. I don't feel like I have a huge ego where I've got to walk in and make sure everybody, I don't
have to put on this front.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of that stuff anymore. Yeah. But I do have the default mode for a lot of things that I'm trying to change and I'm trying to work through. And so I don't remember the timeline. I don't remember the phrase, it was just you enter into my life, and then I start putting that puzzle together, and I recognize if I want to cultivate a relationship, I'm going to have to do things differently and in a different way, because the way that I was doing things subconsciously and was kind of setting up these things to help me feel safer and more protected, were going to create the opposite effect.
I get that.
I wasn't, the end result wasn't us sitting down here to do this thing a year and a half later or whatever, right? The end result would have been like, you and I have, shitty fucking roles every now and then. We don't really do anything or talk outside of jiu-jitsu, and you're just this other guy at fucking jiu-jitsu that pisses me off and that sometimes, gets belly down and makes my life fucking miserable.
Well, I have left the belly down phase of my life.
It's such a good phase, though.
It really is.
Such a good position.
I'm really enjoying my S-mount phase right now.
Yeah, much better. Much better. I don't see any problems with that.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to do S-mount to you. Listen, first of all, I totally get that. I also want you to know that I do not want to battle you.
Right.
Right? Like that is, for me, I have gone through very similar. Like I look at stuff. I had this conversation with my son. I was talking about another person, and I was like, listen, at the end of the day, because he's 9 and he's got a friend who's kind of like a little shitty. He's kind of like, he says some shitty things and this and that. And he's like, he's kind of a bully. Yeah. And I was like, okay. I was like, why do you think he's a bully? And trying to like help my son kind of see some of this stuff. And I was like, listen, at the end of the day, he's probably afraid of you. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, bullies. I was like, to the regard of I'm being mean to be mean, right? Are normally that's out of a fear, you know, I believe. And I was like, if you guys were to get into a fight, what would happen? He's like, I would hurt him. I was like, okay, well, don't do that. I was like, but I could see where he would be, you know, unhappy about that. I was like, but it's not like we don't walk around the world thinking like I could hurt that person. Like that's not a positive. That's not a healthy way to do things. And he's like, okay. I was like, know that you're capable of things, right? You can defend yourself and stuff like that. I was like, but we don't go around trying to size people up and stuff like that. And he was like, okay. And I, literally as I'm like, I like stopped that conversation and I'm like driving. I'm like,
actually, we kind of go through life sizing people up all the time. You know that thing Dad said earlier?
Do as I say, not as I do.
Complete opposite, actually.
Yeah. But I think, I mean, I look at it all the time. I mean, and obviously when we started doing jiu-jitsu, it was like, oh, okay, right? And there's good sides. I love, like, I mean, we've said this. I've looked at you in like a Thursday night, and I'm like, I don't have the energy for you today, right? I'm like, no, I'm just not feeling that right now. Like, I'm tired, right? And it's because I know that it's a battle, and it's a battle that in the beginning was definitely I'm trying to prove, I'm showing, I'm presenting, right? And now it's one of those like I don't care. Like if like you're gonna get me, I'm gonna get you. We're going to enjoy this, but at the end of the day, like our relationship is way beyond the mat. So it doesn't. I don't care. Right?
Yeah.
But I totally don't want to battle you.
Yeah, I don't want to battle you either.
Yeah.
Like it's a really interesting thing where I think jiu-jitsu is a wonderful opportunity for so many different things. I mean, it'll obviously be a big part of this podcast and all the lessons that it's given us over life and that it continues to give us. But the ability to be able to, I mean, you know, it's real clear what, this sounds really stupid. Part of me is like, this is a dumb thing to say, but I mean, there's a part of my brain that works this way, right? Where if you throw you and me into an arena, if you throw you and me into this fucking cage, like it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Oh yeah.
Because on any given day, in any given moment, but at the same time, it's like, I know that there's a thing inside of you. Like that's the thing that jiu-jitsu often teaches. And, you know, that the thing that I'm about to reference and talk about, it's something that happens in a bunch of different places and in a bunch of different areas, right? I know that you know it from military. I know like there's a thing inside of a person that until that thing gets like touched and pushed and prodded and challenged, that person never really understands what they're capable of. Not just with like the ability to push through hard and difficult things and to challenge your body and mentally, all of that stuff. Yes. And then it's just like this, it's not a never ending thing, but it's like, there's layers to it where there's a spot that some people can't go.
Yeah.
That don't have access to, that don't have, for whatever reason, right? I mean, we could glorify it in some poetic way, but I think that there's a certain level of like places that people are willing to go that you and me through jiu-jitsu, as well as like getting to know each other and stuff like that. Like you're the type of guy that I want standing next to me.
Yes.
You're not the type of guy that I want standing across from me.
No. Yeah. 100%.
Right. And if you're standing across from me, it's going to be like, fuck. Dude, I do not want to go to that place.
No.
Right.
Like this, and that's what I talk about, like fighting, right? Like the idea of physically fighting someone.
Right.
I know that this is going to hurt. There's no one walks away from a fight unhurt.
Right.
Like even if you are the physical master and you just kick someone in the side of the head and they fall down, right? Like at my age, like my hips are going to be sore later, right? But I also have to deal with the emotional side of that, right? Of what's happened. I agree that there's a whole bunch of people, I think, and I believe a majority, especially today, that don't know how to get to that point, that scratch in the back of your throat that you can settle, or that heads down, like we're gonna like it doesn't matter, right? And I know that, like, I know exactly what I could handle physically, capably, you know, like even mentally in that space. I know how far I can push myself in those things. Never want to get back there.
Right.
Right. Because it's miserable.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's nothing.
There's a cost.
There's a total cost to it. And it emotionally, intelligently, I mean, intellectually, physically, spiritually, it's terrible.
Yeah. I feel like what it requires is it requires me to put so much of who I am like on hold and over there.
Yep.
It's almost like if I used to talk to Steph a lot about it, not this, but it's kind of like the same thing where it's like you're out and about, you know, you're hanging out with the family and the kids and the wife and everything. And then something happens. Like you need to go that way.
Oh yeah.
And take care of, like, as long as that's taken care of, then I can go to work over here.
I can go to work.
And if I, this is too, so same thing happens internally where it's like, I have to take all of this stuff and set it over there. Like you're not safe in this arena over here.
Yeah.
And then I can go to work.
Yep.
But that cost
is great.
That's too fucking high, dude.
It's great. Yep.
Where it's like all of that stuff is who I am.
Yeah.
This is just one component of me. This is just one little thing that for whatever reason I had the right fucking mix up in the fucking soup. And the trauma and the chaos, who fucking addicted to adrenaline and fucking who knows why.
Yep.
But I got that thing where it's like I can go to work if I need to go to work.
Exactly.
And there's a level of work that I can go to. I know that there's people that can go a bigger level than what I've got.
Yep.
Like I acknowledge that and recognize that, but I'll fucking go to work with the best of them.
Oh yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you put some training behind my fucking workability.
Yeah.
Like it's a scary thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that I don't have to fucking do it anymore.
Right. It's
so nice to have all of me present in my life. I don't have to compartmentalize and put things away anymore.
Yeah.
I don't have to bury parts of myself. I don't have to hurt myself in order to do whatever it is that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so much of my life was doing exactly that. Hurting myself in order to do whatever I thought I needed to do. And a lot of times too, I think it's, there's definitely examples, and we both have plenty of examples where it was like, oh no, I needed to, like, if I was going to get through that experience,
heads
there
down,
was stuff
gotta
like
get to work.
Yeah. But other than those experiences, which are so few and far in between, even in, dangerous experiences, even in military, even in law enforcement, like that's not I don't know. Maybe we're getting off too far into the weeds.
I agree, right? Like there is definitely that level of like you said, that right mix, right? There is, same as you were talking about your brother. Like my brother, who's 10 years older than I am, is more like my dad, 6 foot something tall. I mean, he probably walks around 220, 230, right? I think I was 14 the first time I physically dominated my brother. And it was just one of those, and he was like, what the hell? And I was like, yeah. Like I got more of this soup than you did, right? You got a different soup. Like you're tall. You're better at basketball.
Right.
Good job. Right. But I think that there is a lot so I agree.
What time is it? Are we good on time? You good on time?
Yeah, I've got like I got a little less than 30 minutes to go. Cool. So I definitely think that you've got this, I know you are capable of heads down, go to work.
Yeah.
You don't want to. But because of that, it allows us to relax more.
Around each other?
Well, not just around each other, but I think in the world.
Yeah.
Right? Like when I go to a restaurant, I tend to sit where I can have a better perspective of the room. That helps with my anxiety, right? But at the same time, like if I'm out at the restaurant and if, we live in Tennessee, if I'm carrying, right? If I'm carrying, like I don't ever think about it, right? If I'm not carrying, it's still not a big deal in my world.
Right.
Right? Because it's like, like if that situation comes in, like I can still I'll look at my wife or my children or whoever and be like, go there, be safe. I will do my best. Like I will get between, right? But I can go to work.
Yeah.
Like it's not so I think that actually allows you to, and this kind of gets into some of that like Jordan Peterson, like somebody who is incapable of violence, who says they're peaceful. Like, no, you're not peaceful. Like you're incapable.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that creates a difference in like when you look at people and you're like, yeah, you are capable of, and when we roll, like we use different aspects of our attributes, right? And you flow better, right? I tend to force more, right? But like Big Chad, as far like somebody said the other day when we were talking about it, like, oh, he's super easy. Like he's never really hard to roll with or anything like that. And I'm like, are you kidding me?
We're not rolling with the same
Chad. I was like, Chad's 6'5", 6'6", weighs 315 pounds, and I felt every pound of that.
You're getting nice Chad.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because he's like, yeah, whatever. Like, so what if I'm gentle with this person? It doesn't matter, But in his world, when you, myself, like when one of us are paired.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's a different game. But I feel like he probably walks around, he's like, yeah, whatever, like I'm twice everyone's size. But then, like, oh, there's a brown belt over there, or there's a black belt who's really wants to do something. Like it's all fun and games. Like, oh yeah, I know jiu-jitsu really well. Yeah, I threw you across the room. What's your jiu-jitsu going to do there?
Yeah. I think that the ability to move through life this way and have this thing in my back pocket, I'm really grateful for.
100%.
Like really grateful that it exists.
Yep.
Really grateful that if I need it, I can call upon it. It's the type of thing. I mean, and it's like anything else where it definitely will go through phases where, it's not as crisp and as sharp and as fine-tuned as it needs to be.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's there if I need it.
Yeah.
But more and more, it's like, how can I move through life without it?
Yeah.
Because it's just not needed. It's something that I don't need in my life anymore. And the weight of carrying it's like what I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
How do you feel at this point? Like, are you still, like, if we look at it from that perspective where there's parts of you that you have to compartmentalize and shut down, I know that it's not to the fullest extent, obviously, and but do you feel like is there stuff that's coming up for you right now that you feel like you would like to set down, but maybe don't know how to, or are afraid to, or components of it that you're getting curious about?
It's interesting because like there are certain things that I don't mind, right? So like physical attributes, I'm not a small person, right? I look like a strong individual, right? And I don't like that that's normally how I'm initially judged.
Okay.
Right? Early perceptions, and I hate, like, perception is reality, right? As much as people are like, well, that's not fair, and that's the fucking facts.
It's just the reality.
It's the reality of the world, right? If you look like you don't do anything all day, to me, you don't do anything all day. You could be the busiest person in the world, but if that's all I ever see, that's what my reality is, right? It's my perception. When, especially for me in like a business sense, in the corporate America of worlds and all that, I walk in and I've got tattoos and I'm not a small person, and instantly people build this reality of who I am, right? And like I was thinking about this, and it's like if you were going to describe yourself, like the first thing that I come up with is like I'm a big nerd, right? Like I'm not an anime nerd, but man, like I like 3D printers, right? And I like robotics and stuff like that, right? So I'm a bit of a nerd in some of that stuff. Like, yeah, I like to learn more about how arc welding, tubing, stuff like that. But I definitely try to do my best to get back to like your question. Like I intentionally do my best to try to shadow some of my like military, how I present in that stuff. I don't wear grunt style shirts, right? I think they're super funny, right? And all that stuff. I don't have a backpack that's got like I don't have a 511 backpack that I carry or anything with all the webbing on it or anything like that.
You don't have your go bag that goes everywhere with you?
No, I have a go bag, but I don't like carry it. Like when I'm on the airplane, I've got like a JanSport backpack, right? And I'm normally I wear polos most of the time to try to dress. That's me dressing down.
Okay.
And like, oh.
Are you trying to make up for that first impression of your size? Are you trying to give a little bit different of a
I want people's perception of me to be different than just this big, bald, bearded, tattooed, guy, and so I try to change that with like some of my dress and my appearance and stuff like that. But I also think a lot, and just not on that topic, but like my time in the military is part of who I am. It's not who I am. Right. And that's the big, like, I think there's a lot of guys who, and that's fine, right? Like they own that. And they live in that like,
well, it's identity.
It's they identify with this and that, right? Like
I've thought a lot about that because it's the same thing where, if you're a cop, it becomes your whole identity. It's the thing that literally it's your forward facing way of moving through the world where, you don't have to be around an officer for very long until you realize that he's he's going to tell you that he's a cop. Cops are usually like, I'm a cop.
Yeah.
Right. And I've thought about how many times in my life, my identity has changed.
Yep.
And now I'm at the phase where I'm trying to figure out what's underneath all of them.
Yeah.
What's the real truth of who Craig really is? Because all of these things that I've used in order to, not just identify myself, but it's that forward facing thing of presenting. A lot of it has been worth for me and value. Like when somebody asks you, not just asks you what you do, but that basically like, I think when people ask you what you do, it's kind of this question of like, what the fuck are you in the world? Right. What gives you value and worth to be a human in this fucking existence almost, right? Like it's a deeper question than just like, oh, what do you do? We use it as just this little thing to ask people and but it is very much give me something to define you, to put you into the box inside of my head. It's a big question.
Yeah.
And when I got fired from being a cop, that thing that I would use to say, hey, this is what I do to get validity in somebody else's eyes is gone. Yeah. I can't say it anymore. And there's a lot of people that would still, whether they got fired, whether they retired, whether they moved on and changed careers or something like that, they would still hold on to that identity after the fact to give themselves some sense of validity and purpose in life. And I understand that completely. And you see that all the time with military guys, right?
Yep.
Where it becomes their whole identity from that point forward in life.
5'11" boots, cargo pants. Right.
Yeah. And I guess what I'm curious about is are you in a similar boat now where you're trying to figure out like not what my new identity is, but who I really am underneath all of these kind of different things that I've layered on over life?
Yeah, I actually think more of about not like who am I, who do I want to be?
Okay.
Right? Like, so like if you were going to like, when I think to myself like, hey, what's your elevator pitch of who you are, right? The thing that I tend to want to, and this is what I want to say, but this is also what I want to say, right? Okay. Like that's a terrible way to describe that, right? But like, here's what comes to mind first, but this is also what I want you to believe. So like when somebody's like, hey, what's your elevator pitch? Like, yeah, I'm a father, right? I'm a husband, Marine, right? And I am I work in, I don't say core, I work with small businesses, right? I'm in the fitness industry. And I like jiu-jitsu, right? Like that's kind of like what I stick with. And then I look at the things to kind of go along with that, right? Like and then I use that little pitch to remind myself of what's important. And I put those things, I love my wife to death, right? And she is one of the most important people in my entire life. My children are more important, right? Like if I had to put them on rungs, my children are more important, right? Right behind that is my wife. I will always have the pride of I'm a U.S. Marine, right? And that's part of that is the brainwashing that we do of like once a Marine, always a Marine.
Yeah, that programming.
That's 100%, right? And then when it comes to like my job, right? Like I try to think about it as in like, I help small business owners, right? That's what I do, because that was a big part of how I grew up, was in small, like my mom had a small business. I've had my own small business. So I try to help with that. And I try to think like, okay, this is how I present and this is who I want to be. I want to be the father first, because I'm not always the father first. I want to be the husband, but things take priority sometimes, and it's not. So I use those as kind of a reminder to myself of my hierarchy of importance, right? The upside is the kids go to school and I get to spend a lot of time with my wife. So
I've looked at all of those. I mean, not all of yours, but
yeah,
it's all of those things that I would label like I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I'm constantly trying to even pick apart those. And it's like, what if father's taken away from me? Right? What if husband's taken away from me? And you think, well, I'm always going to be a father. I am always going to be a father, right? That's not something that anybody can take away from me. But my kids could choose otherwise.
They could.
Right? And then am I still going to be like, oh, I'm a father? No, because I mean, I might say that forward facing.
Yeah. But how does that make you feel?
Exactly. I'm going to have a different feeling.
Makes me sweaty to think about like all the like.
Yeah.
Because you said like, what if that's taken? I'm like, oh God, like that. Instant fears for me, right?
Super challenging.
Yeah.
And so then again, how is that the thing that I'm using to present this picture to the world?
Yep.
Right. And I'm always looking now, trying to figure out who the fuck is this guy really? And I'm really trying to go back to like 4, 5, 6 years old. What was I into? What did I like? How did I think? What was exciting for me? How did I see the world at that age? That's what I'm trying to recreate in some way now, because that version of me, like the 5-year-old version of me, was so imaginative and so creative. And like there's components of it that I had to have, like when I say had to have, but I had, magical thinking as a coping mechanism because of trauma. I had to, escape into my imagination and all of these other kind of things in order to survive the reality of what life was really like in the moments. So there's components of that to it as well, but I can sense the pure nature of like this version of Craig that existed at some point in time before there was too much stuff on top of it. So how much of that stuff can I pull off and find that version of Craig that existed and then bring him forth now to the present moment and just let him finally fucking be.
Yeah.
Right? Let him finally exist without any constraints or labels or identity issues or struggles or pasts or traumas. Just like, who the fuck are you, dude?
Yeah.
And that's been like the big, I think, overarching theme of what I'm doing across the board with everything.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to get to that thing of like really understanding who I am, free from programming, free from trauma, free from identity, society, all these kind of different things that get placed on us, that we place on ourselves. What's underneath it all? And when I try to come with the simulation, it's the fucking Matrix, it's fucking Neo.
I'm sorry, you were going, and I as you were saying, I was like, it's the simulation, man.
It's totally the simulation.
You got to pull back that program, that computer code.
Yeah, I think about that all the time too. Where I'm just fucking up in the night. I'm a fucking somebody's VR goggles that they're putting on.
Did you ever see the movie? Is it Dark? Oh, I can't remember the name of it. Like Dark City.
Yeah.
Oh, where they're like making all the things change all the time. Like that's the simulation, right?
That's so trippy, dude. Yeah. Let's wrap up so that
cool.
You can make your call. I don't even know. Fucking, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
This was great. I feel like we definitely we jumped. But this is our like second time sitting down, right? And I think this is great, right? I definitely think this is going to be, I think, super fun to dig into all kinds of stuff. We had said, like, let's kind of talk a little bit more about who we are, right? And I feel like, to be honest, we have just like, just scratched.
Yeah, I got so many fucking questions for you.
Yeah, dude. Like, I feel bad because, like, you were like, hey, what's some of your, like, defining moments, right? And like we didn't even get a chance to like dig into some of yours, right? Because now I'm like sitting here going like, well, I told you about me, but I want to know about you now.
Tune in next week.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, there's lots. We got plenty of time.
We got plenty of time.
Yeah, I'm excited, dude.
Yeah, this is going to be super fun.
It's way fun.
Yeah.
If you enjoy this podcast, which we really, really hope that you do.
Yes.
The easiest thing that you can do is just share it with somebody. Like in the realm of podcasting, it's still kind of like the old school, the best, what's the word? The best advertisement is word of mouth.
Yep.
Like when you tell somebody, hey, I really dig this podcast, that's going to be so much better than like if you share a clip on social media. All of that's really helpful as well. Definitely go rate the show, review the show, leave us 5 stars. All of those things are really, really helpful. And please do that if you enjoyed the podcast. And if you don't, then fuck you. We don't really care what you do. But
pound sand.
On top of that, pound sand, right? Go kick rocks.
Yeah, go kick rocks.
That's what we used to say all the time in the jail because I did time. I told you I was a corrections officer.
Yeah, yeah. So
that was totally
go
like,
kick rocks.
Yeah, go kick rocks.
We,
Get the hell out of here.
We say pound sand.
Yeah,
go pound sand.
Anyways, tell somebody about the podcast. Send this episode to somebody that you think might benefit from it, and that helps the show immensely.
Yes.
Go to YouTube. Make sure you subscribe to the channel there. And even though, like, I hate notifications on my phone, but if it's a podcast or somebody that I want to support and that I like and that I enjoy, I make sure that I click the notification button because that actually helps on the back end. So that would help us as well.
Yeah.
That if you like the show, subscribe to it wherever you follow and listen. Click the little notification button, leave us a review, tell somebody about the podcast. Craig's losing his voice already.
Oh, buddy.
But all of those things are going to really help because we've got a lot more in us that we're going to be bringing and sharing with you all, and we're excited. So
yeah, this is going to be, I'm super excited. Listen, and if you got anything negative you want to say to anybody, right, you just keep that shit to yourself, right? I don't need your opinion. No, just
let's battle it out in the comments.
That's right. See you on the mats.
We're ready.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Later, guys. That was great, man.